Good morning, Danvers. This is Jim Moroz, and this is Season 1, Episode 3 of A Republic Always. This is a new series here that I've started just because, DCAT plays that a democracy now, which kind of flies in the face of what a republic is. So, America is a republic. It's a constitutional representative republic, and that's why I'm doing the show. It's I don't know if you've noticed, but in the news in the last several months or so, it's a constitutional crisis. Anytime Donald Trump takes a breath, it's a constitutional crisis. There was no constitutional crisis when BLM and whoever that else was with them were burning down half the country back in 2020 while Joe Biden was president. But heaven forbid a few people get caught up in the FBI and the CIA on J6, which the FBI and CIA had 26 confidential informants, otherwise known as antagonists or whatever you call them, in there provoking, the agent provocateurs, pushing the people to do this thing, and it was horrendous what happened. A couple of people, but it was orchestrated, it was forced, and it was crazy. But the Constitution has always been under assault, and so it's funny that I start this constitutional series here is because I watch a lot of PragerU videos, and they just came out with a 10-part series on the Constitution. So we'll watch that. It's a 5.5, 6-minute video. In video number 1, we'll do one a month until we get through all 10. But the first one just shows how the Constitution was started and why we had to start it, because there's always factions and people getting riled up about things, and the government needs to be able to control this. And the founding fathers in the Federalist paper, they just nailed it. It's like what's happening today with factions and all these little groups of things that are happening, and it's just amazing. But we will get into that. But again, the Constitution, we had already won the Revolutionary War, and the country was running on the Articles of Confederation, which a lot of people thought that's what we should do. But the founding fathers said there was just too much chaos and confusion going on between the states, so they came up and they locked themselves in the room. The video will go through it great, and how they had to fine-tune what was going on here. And a lot of people didn't agree. You can't agree, Married couples, you're lucky if they agree 80-20% of the time, So when you have 10 million, or now we're up to 250 million, or we have 300 million. I don't even know how many people are in the country anymore, but we got a lot of people, and we got a lot of factions. So we need to be able to work within each other's groups here. That's the whole concept. We need to work in each other's groups. Now, if you can flash up picture 1 there, which is the book cover, it's, here we go. So this is a document that shaped the nation. This is the Federalist Papers was brilliantly defended. What was its intent at the time of the Revolutionary Charter? A Constitution of the United States written by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. The Federalist Papers explains the complexities of a constitutional government, its political structure, and principles based on the inherent rights of man. Scholars have long regarded this work as a milestone in political science and a classic of American political theory. Based on the original McLean edition of the 1788 and edited by noted historian Clinton Rossiter, this special edition includes textual notes, selected bibliographies, table of contents, and an appendix, and the copy of the Constitution, cross-reference with the Federalist Papers, and an index of ideas that lists the major political concepts discussed in copies of the Declaration of Independence and the Articles of Confederation. And you got to remember that the Federalist Papers was a series of articles that were written individually. So there's 85 articles and covering a variety of topics, which are all defined in the book here. And it's actually cross-referenced. So you can read the Constitution and it says, well, these Federalist Papers discuss what this part of the Constitution means. And I got to laugh. I really got to laugh. I mean, laughing is just an extreme emotion. I might as well be crying, because when these people cry it's a constitutional crisis, the people that are saying it's a constitutional crisis have no idea how far away from the Constitution they are. They don't know how they've perverted the Constitution in our form of government when they're all screaming, we need democracy, democracy. No, we don't. We need the rule of law and the basic, foundation of our laws is the Constitution. We need to stick to it. The Constitution is a limiting document. It limits the power of government. And the people that are screaming and crying, like about the Doge report, and the people that are trying to cut back government that has exploded and is stealing all our tax money and is just squandering it, actually they're taking it themselves. How do you think someone who makes $200,000 a year ends up being a multimillionaire after 4 years? Do the math. They stole it. It's, they make it look good, but it's all, fraudulent. And that's why the people that are screaming the loudest about the Doge are the ones that are making the most money from the USAID and all this other stuff, and they're all corrupt. All the people that are corrupt are screaming, and they will get. They need to be. No one's above the law. That's what they keep saying. So let's get them to fess up to the law. And the Constitution it's a great document, but we need to understand what's really happening within the Constitution and how it limits government, and how the states didn't even want to sign it until they put in the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, because they said these are things that the government can't even touch. Don't even touch these things. You can't touch them. You can't touch our freedom of speech. You can't touch our guns. You can't force people to do things. And so but that's what they're doing. I mean, our poor little town of Danvers, when you go to the school committee meetings and you go to town hall and stuff, and they say, well, it's the law, Jim. We have to follow the law. We got to, all these unfunded mandates and grants and all these laws they pass, and then the laws are so bad they have to create emergency repairs to the laws because they're legislatively, wrong. They're just, So again, it's just one mistake after another. Government is usurping power after power after power. So I'm going to take a break here. We're going to cue up the video, and we'll watch the video from PragerU, and it's going to define the underpinnings and the starts of the Constitution, and we'll just let it rip.
Against all odds, the Americans won their War of Independence. But their success brought a new challenge, no less daunting. What sort of government should they choose for themselves? How could they ensure that the tyranny of the English king, George III, would not be replaced by a homegrown tyranny? One possibility was to establish an American monarchy with a better king. That was tempting for some, especially because they had a superb person for the job, General George Washington. To his legion of admirers, the fact that he did not want to be king made him an even more attractive candidate. The other possibility was to establish a republic, a government of and by the people and their representatives. But this solution came with a big problem. Historically, republics like those in ancient Greece and Rome had always failed. And when they failed, they were usually replaced by the very worst, most oppressive forms of tyranny. Might there be a way to make republicanism work and last? To structure a constitution that would protect the new American republic from the social and political pathologies that had destroyed republics throughout history. America's founding fathers, men like Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison believed they had answers. They had risked everything when they declared their independence from England. They were willing to risk everything again to create a new, different, and better type of republic. The key, they all agreed, was to establish structural limits on power, the power of anyone and any institution exercising governmental authority. In the summer of 1787, in one of the most creative acts in human history, these men, minus Jefferson and Adams, who were serving the country abroad, fashioned a national government divided into three separate parts or branches: the legislative, Congress; the executive, the president; and the judicial, the courts. Congress would make the laws. The executive would execute the laws, and the courts would settle disputes arising under the Constitution and laws of the United States. Dividing power would prevent power being concentrated in any one branch, the concept of checks and balances. Moreover, the central government would be limited to the powers specifically delegated to it, having no powers beyond those enumerated. Where then would most of the powers of government reside? The answer was with the states. This was not, as some wrongly suppose, done to protect slavery. Rather, it was done out of the common sense belief that those public officials nearer to the people would naturally be more responsive and accountable to the people. Just to make sure nobody missed the point, after attaching a Bill of Rights to the Constitution, the founders enshrined this principle in the 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. In short, whatever the Constitution does not specifically delegate to the national government belongs to the states and the people. But the power of the states was also limited by constitutional prohibitions in certain areas, either because power in those areas had been delegated exclusively to the national government, such as the power to enter into treaties with other nations, or because the framers did not want government at any level to have certain powers, such as the power to confer titles of nobility, something incompatible with republicanism. Still, as much care as the framers took to constrain government power, federal and state, they knew their efforts would fail unless one more component was present: citizens imbued with the spirit of republicanism, people who understood the principles of their Constitution, who valued self-government, and who would be willing to do the work necessary for its maintenance. Citizens who would not yield to demagogues who promised prosperity, security, or anything else at the price of liberty. James Madison had this in mind when he said that only a well-instructed people could be permanently a free people. By a well-instructed people, Madison meant above all a people well-educated about our constitutional liberties and responsibilities. When, at the conclusion of the Constitutional Convention, a woman asked Benjamin Franklin what kind of government he and the others had proposed for the nation, he famously responded, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it." The wise old Philadelphia polymath had history in mind in giving that answer. He knew that he and his colleagues at the convention had supplied only the mechanics of what was needed for a republic to long endure. The rest could only be supplied by we the people, understanding and fulfilling our duties as citizens. That's why studying the Constitution is essential. How can we fulfill our duties as citizens if we don't understand the document on which that citizenship is based? I'm Robert George, professor of jurisprudence and director of the James Madison program at Princeton University for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. To keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.
It's very simple, and people who try to confuse it or make it sound complicated, you don't understand. It's too complicated, Jim. It's not that simple. I hear that all the time, but yeah, it is that simple. It's either right or it's wrong. It's constitutional or it's not. And again, I don't know how many times we've had congressional legislators try to pass a bill where you would have to cite the constitutional authority for for creating this law and this bill. And they won't do it because half the stuff they do is unconstitutional, that they're not following the Constitution. And again, that's all going to be found out as we go through all these issues with the Doge and everything else. But, and the people that are screaming and crying the loudest, and it's a shame. We gotta step back and look what's going on. It's very, I've been laid off numerous times myself. I understand the whole concept of getting laid off, having to go find a job. Hey, I was laid off when I was 62 from Oracle, and it's like, yeah, who's going to hire, a 62-year-old white guy, in this, day and age? But I was literally unemployed for 14 months before I found a job, But I finally found one by the grace of God, and it was a great job. But at any rate, yes, there is life after layoff. It can be done, and yes, there is a little pain. Of course, sometimes when you get laid off, depending on what kind of job, you get these little severance packages. We don't get big golden parachutes like some people, but at any rate, life is good. So the founding fathers really had, great vision to create this Constitution and how to limit government and clearly define it. Like he said, they set up the mechanics for everything to work, and the only way to sustain it, as Benjamin Franklin said, it's a republic if you can keep it, and it's because we need a well-trained and instructed people. You can't keep it if you don't know what it is. And it's a constitutional republic. We're not a democracy, and it's very important we understand the difference. And one of the things that jumped out at me, which I want to talk about today, is factions. They talked about in the Federalist Papers. We're going to go into just a section of the Federalist number 10 and how it talks about factions and what they are, because it's very important to understand that we have factions today, like I had mentioned before, like the BLM folks, and they're, rioting in the streets. There was murders, there was they burned down buildings, they burned down businesses, they built out federal buildings, police stations. It was the summer of destruction and hate. And no one even got arrested. They just went, oh yeah, that's okay. They're mostly peaceful protests because they're all part of the faction. And we need to, I've heard it explained, it's like, we all, we've all been through this. We all went to high school. Everybody, when you go into the cafeteria, the jocks are sitting here, the geek smart people are sitting over here, and everybody breaks into their groups, the theater people, the poetry people, and we all talk to each other, but, at the end of the day, we all feel comfortable in our own groups, and that's just the way it is. And there's nothing wrong with that, but when groups start forcing you, I need everyone to be a sports jock. No, we're not going to do that. And you can't make everyone be a super genius, and you can't make everyone go into theater. But we all need to work together. We need to work and support each other. That's how we do it. And so that's why the Founding Fathers talk about it. So if we can put up picture number 1, I'm going to just read this. It's all in Old English, so it's even tough for me to read, but I'm going to try to see if we can read it. It will be found indeed, on a candid review of our situation, that some of the distresses under which we labor have been erroneously charged on the operation of our governments. But it will be found at the same time that other causes will not alone account for many of our heaviest misfortunes, and particularly for that prevailing and increasing distrust of public engagements and alarm for private rights, which are echoed from one end of the continent to the other. These must be chiefly, if not wholly, the effects of the unsteadiness and injustice with which a factious spirit has tainted our public administration. A factious spirit tainted our public administration. Keep that in mind. By a faction, I understand that a number of citizens, whether amounting to a majority or a minority of the whole, who are united and actuated by some common impulse of passion or of interest adverse to the rights of other citizens or to the permanent and aggregate interests of the community. There are two methods of curing the mischiefs of a faction, the one by removing its causes, the other by controlling its effects. There again, there are two methods of removing the causes of the faction, the one by destroying the liberty which is essential to its existence, and the other by giving every citizen the same opinions and the same passions and the same interests. So I'm going to take a break in that so we can just kind of pass what we just read. So he's talking about there's going to be factions coming up. Some of them are going to be good, some of them are going to be bad, and we need to focus on what's really happening with these factions, okay? And because the country is so big, they figured that we wouldn't have to worry about it. But because a lot of people don't quite understand how the Constitution works and how our government works and how our representatives are supposed to be representing us, they don't have a clue. They're not even representing us. They take an oath of office to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution from enemies within and without. And so they need to protect the Constitution. And we all, of course, the other thing is we got to realize that when we talk about people's rights, we have to say, wait a minute, where do our rights come from? Well, again, the Founding Fathers identified where our rights come from. I ask you the question, answer in your mind rhetorically, where do you think your rights come from? Okay? In the Declaration of Independence, it says we are all endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights. Okay? Unalienable rights, unalienable means that you can't change them. It doesn't. These are rights that are given to us by God, and no man and no government can deny us those rights, okay? And so they listed out some of them in the Bill of Rights, but all our rights are supposed to be protected by the government, not limited and mocked by the government, which is where we are, but unfortunately. So, and it's because of the factiousness of this. I mean, a perfect example was, if you ever watch the videos of some of these people giving testimony to Beacon Hill representatives that were like passed gun law that was so outrageous. It's the worst gun law ever written. They've already had to change it 2 or 3 times because the Secret Service and the FBI and people couldn't even come in out of state without, you can't take a gun in here. So then they had to change it, emergency this, emergency that. Even on the MBTA laws, they had, oh, it's an emergency. You know, they create these laws, they're flawed, and it's just crazy what they're doing here. So, and they're just overreaching their power. It's an overreach big time. Oh man, I'm running way out of time here. Well, let's kind of get back to the factions. Let's put up picture number 2. Hopefully it starts with, I could never be more truly said, or it could be never be more truly said that the first remedy that is worse than the disease. And liberty is to faction what air is to fire, an ailment without which it instantly expires, or an element. But it could be not be a less folly to abolish liberty, which is essential to political life, because it nourishes faction, than it would be to wish the annihilation of air, which is essential to animal life because it imparts to fire its destructive agency. So what's good can be bad, and what's bad can be good. It all depends on the different groups and the different things. So we have to be sensitive as to what, and they explain this very, detailed in this, the run-on English language sentences. The second expedient is as impractical as the first would be unwise. As long as the reason of man continues fallible and he is at liberty to exercise it, different opinions will be formed. As long as the connection subsists between his reason and his self-love, his opinions and his passions will have a reciprocal influence on each other. and the former will be objects to which the latter will attach themselves. The diversity in the faculties from men from which the rights of property originate is not less than inseparable obstacle to a uniformity of interests. The protection of these faculties is the first object of government. From the protection of different and unequal faculties of acquiring property, the possession of different degrees and kinds of property immediately results. And from the influence of these on the sentiments and views of the respective proprietors ensues a division of society into separate interests and parties. And that can be more clearly seen than what's happening in today's stage, where we have certain leaders of the faction, there's faction leaders, starting with George Soros and all his little minions, that keep saying that pitting people against people in its most basic format, which is what they were talking about, propriety and ownership and property, is the rich versus the poor. Trump is only supporting and protecting the billionaires and millionaires, and he's doing it at the expense of all us poor people, which is not true. They're lying. But they love to pit, because it's only human nature for people to what I just read. That's what they're saying. It's human nature to gravitate towards what you think is true, but it's not. And so we have to educate ourselves. See, I am a conservative. I'm not a liberal. I'm not a woke person. And I am a consummate, pragmatic person who I look at both sides of the issues. I know what each side of the issue is. So therefore, I can make an intelligent decision. When I try to talk to some people that are woke, they just call me a racist and a homophobic and everything else. It's like, because they can't defend their positions. That's why it's just terrible. But we need to have a better discussion as to what the issues are and what we're doing here. So again, we're in the middle of this, and this is what's happening. They're stoking the fires of man's passion and inflaming people. Elon Musk was a god of the wokeness because he created the electric car, and he was selling electric cars. He's saving the world. He's saving the climate. He's saving us all in the energy crisis. As soon as he became Trump's friends, he's the worst person in the world. They won't even give him any positive press, and they're burning and they're firebombing his car dealerships, and people are posting that they need to assassinate Trump. We need to assassinate Elon Musk and all this other stuff. And it's like, what is wrong with this picture? Who in there? We have congressmen and senators in this from our very state who go along with it. Oh, they're silent. So their silence is acceptance to all this violence and crap that's going on right now, in total violation of the Constitution, in total violation of their oath of office, in total violation of the rights of man as defined in the Declaration of Independence and given to us by God, and supposed to be protected by this republic, this country. And our judges, well, like they said, they went through, these judges are way off base in their stopping certain things. People are supposed to go to the judges for relief. The judges aren't supposed to look out and go, hey, you can't do, no, that's not their job. They can't do that. They have to, you can't bring I brought a couple of claims and I didn't have standing. So it doesn't matter whether I was right or wrong. You don't have standing, so you can't. And that's what they did with Trump, right? He brought lawsuits about the voting, and they said, oh, you don't have standing. We don't care what the evidence is. You don't have standing. So they threw the cases out. All right. It's a half hour, and this show is almost over. So you know what? We could go on. It's kind of hard to undo the last 20, 30 years of constitutional misrepresentation, but this is where we are. This is episode 3. Episode 4 is even going to be better. But it's time to wake up and smell the tyranny, folks. You really need to wake up and see what's going on, because our elected representatives aren't representing us, and you better find out who's running for office and vote those people out who are not following the interests of the Constitution and our citizens. We the people. God bless America. See you next month. This show is over.